Starting to think that using this at the start is becoming my thing. Anyway, intro, take one. Hello again everyone, Steve here. And tonight we're going to be talking about yet another movie that I really wanted to see that came out in 2020 and didn't get to see in 2020, but did get to see recently. The movie I'm talking about tonight is Minari, directed by Lee Isaac Chung and starring Steven Yeun, Yeri Han, and Yuh-jung Youn. The film takes place in the 1980s and follows the Yi family, a Korean-American family who have just moved to Arkansas after already moving to California, in an attempt to start a farm in hopes of a better life. As I've mentioned a few different times, when I get super hyped up for a movie because so many people are giving it super high praise and tons of accolades, which Minari is one of those movies, I end up getting a little apprehensive up to when I start watching it because I end up starting to think that, maybe I'm getting myself too hyped up for this thing. What if it's not worth all the hype? What if I'm setting my expectations too high and it ends up being good but not meeting those expectations? Now to that, looking back, I have to say I had nothing to worry about because Minari is yet another one of those movies that came out in 2020 that made the year feel a little bit better than the craziness that happened in 2020 warranted. If I had to sum it up in a few words, I'd say that Minari is simultaneously heartfelt, very funny, very sad, very dramatic, and very real feeling and very authentic feeling. And overall, just a really good movie. But you know from my reviews that I'm not going to let those very small amounts of words suffice. So we're going to take a deep dive into what I think makes Minari a very good movie. As I normally do in my movie reviews, I'm going to start by talking about the acting in the movie, which is excellent all across the board. None of it ever feels, though, like it's showy excellent. Certain movies, you have excellent performances and they're going all out and being really showy and bombastic. Whereas with Minari, it's all very understated. You never have that performance that feels like somebody's trying to grab at an Oscar nomination. I don't know why I did this. Steven Yeun is very good in the lead role as Jacob, the father of the family, who ends up taking his family into a very odd situation that they're not used to. Sure, they're used to moving around and they're used to having kind of a hard life in California, but when they move to Arkansas and they experience this for the first time and they're being thrown into situation after situation that they're not used to and don't really know how to handle, it usually makes for the person who put them there being a very not likable character. And there are times where the character of Jacob is very hard to deal with, but Steven Yeun adds something to the role that makes him very sympathetic. And everyone else is great in the movie too. Yeri Han is great as his wife, and the two kid actors are excellent, especially the little boy. He's amazing in the movie. But the real star of the show, I have to say, is Yuh-jung Youn. She plays the grandmother, and she comes into the movie a little later in than the rest of the characters do, but holy shit, she is really good in this movie. She's not your typical grandmother character, or at least what the little boy thinks is the typical Americanized version of a grandmother. She swears, she makes jokes, often at the expense of the little boy, for some very hilarious scenes. She's a very strong-willed woman who also has the snarky side to her, but ultimately she cares very much about the family, especially the kids. And that leads into something else that I really liked about the movie, which is the dynamic between the family, especially the relationship, and very unlikely relationship, that blossoms between the grandmother and the little boy. I could go on and on and on about all of the great technical things about Minari. It has fantastic cinematography. It really captures the landscape of rural Arkansas really well. And I could go on and on and on about how great the screenplay is. I could go on and on and on about how great the music is. And all of those things are true. But what really struck a chord with me with Minari is how personal it feels. So what I mean by that is Lee Isaac Chung, he wrote this movie and directed this movie very much based on things that happened to him in his own life. And honestly, while you're watching the movie, you get that feeling. There's something about how this movie progresses that feels very personal. We've got a really simple story. At the heart of the movie, we're looking at a story about a guy who wants to start a farm and moves his family to this new place to start this farm. But within that, you've got these little mini stories that are happening, and they feel like they're turning into something universal as the story goes on. The relationship between the little boy and the grandmother, the dad having so many problems that he's running into while trying to start this farm. And not to get too far into the details, but the relationship between the husband and the wife starts to get fractured, and you don't know exactly where that's going to go. There are underlying themes, and explores those themes really well visually, but it doesn't talk down to the characters in the movie, and as a result, it doesn't talk down to the audience. There's nothing in the movie that feels manipulative or fake. It all feels real, and it's not like a gritty kind of real. It's actually more like the director's looking on his previous life, or basically his childhood, his upbringing, with a level of fondness. If there's any negative I have to give the film, it's that it's very slow moving. However, I can't really say that that's a huge negative because, honestly, I don't think this movie would have worked with a fast pace. And it's deliberately slowly paced. I know I'm rambling a bit about a lot of the things that Minari kind of makes you feel like instead of the technical specs, but that's really one of the things that makes Minari a great movie. It's not necessarily how complex a lot of the technical specs are, because when you get down to it, they are beautifully done, but they're all really simple things. It's really what Lee Isaac Chung is able to do with the direction and how he tells his story that makes this movie really well worth watching. And another thing that I have to add on to that helps me explain that just a little bit better, I think. The ending of Minari, I'm not going to give it away. It's one of those rare endings that makes you feel like you're losing hope, but at the same time gives you a little bit of hope in the very final frames. It's one of those ones where something not so great happens, and that's a massive understatement, but there's a level to it and something depicted that gives you just a little glimmer of hope and makes you feel a little happy despite the bad things that are happening. And that alone makes me want to give this movie a high grade. Overall, Minari is a very sweet, tender, and funny movie with some very hard-hitting dramatic moments that don't feel overly dramatized and feel totally realistic. And all of that makes me definitely want to recommend this film. Not my favorite of the year 2020, but it's up there. And I have to recommend you see it if you get the chance. And that's it for my review of Minari. If you really like this video, go ahead and hit that like button. It really helps people find it, and it helps out with the YouTube algorithm. And if you want to actually see more videos from me, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. And if you want to actually be notified when I make a new video, instead of just randomly seeing that a video popped up in your feed every great now and then from me, go ahead and hit that bell icon so you can actually be notified when I post a new video. And with that, have a good night, and I'll see you later.